There are a handful of studios that I'm a big fan of, despite not having played many, if any, of their games. A good example of this is Monolith Soft. My fondness for the studio goes back to grade school after I watched a friend play a bit of Xenosaga Episode 2. I was immediately intrigued and gradually dove into the company's history and its back catalog, from Xenogears in the pre-Monolith days to, oddly enough, Dragon Ball Z Attack of the Saiyans. One game of theirs that really stuck with me was Xenoblade Chronicles. This is in part because it's hard not to get invested in a game after watching it go through the kind of journey the original Xenoblade Chronicles did. From its first trailer, where it was titled Monado: The Beginning of the World, to its initial release as a Japanese and European exclusive, to Operation Rainfall, the fan campaign to convince Nintendo to release the game stateside. The original Xenoblade Chronicles went through a lot, but it seems to have been worth it, with the series now positioned as a premier Nintendo exclusive with 3 main entries, some DLC and expansions, and one very ambitious spin-off stranded on the Wii U. So why am I only now getting around to playing it? The truth is, I've started the game a couple times before, I just never finished it. This is a bit of a bad habit of mine. It's not uncommon for my mood to shift a few hours into a game, so I end up dropping it. But Xenoblade Chronicles in particular had a couple factors working against it. First was its size. I'm no stranger to 100-hour RPGs, but the longer a game is, the more opportunities there are for my mood to wander, so it's really gotta hit with me if I'm to stick with it. There's also the side quests. We'll get more into this later, but as someone who typically tries to do everything I can on a first run through, the prospect of several hundred side quests on top of a 100-hour story was daunting. But after wrapping up Final Fantasy VII Remake, I drifted between a few things with nothing really grabbing me. On a lark, I booted up Xenoblade Chronicles expecting it to be another casualty of my ever-meandering mood, but instead what I found was exactly what I needed. A game with solid character work, zen-inducing combat, an obscene number of distractions, a phenomenal score, and one of my favorite endings in any game. As usual, full spoilers ahead. We start at the beginning of the world. The two titans, the Mechonis and the Bionis, are waging war for the last time, as with the severing of the Mechonis' arm and the stabbing of the Bionis' chest, they die, but from their corpses springs new life. Those of the Bionis are organic in nature, while those of the Mechonis are mechanical, two groups seemingly destined to continue the fight their gods began. From there we jump ahead, long after the bodies of the Titans have gone cold, and watch as two such groups, the Homs of the Bionis and Mechon of the Mechonis, clash in the valley formed by the decaying Mechonis blade. Dunban, wielding the Monado, a sword thought to have belonged to the Bionis itself, leads the Homs to victory over the Mechon, seemingly once and for all. This victory comes at a cost, however, as on that day Dunban lost friends, comrades, and the use of his right arm. We fast forward once more to the peaceful Homs community of Colony 9. A year has passed since the climactic clash in Sword Valley, and we watch as Shulk, a young engineer, salvages for parts amongst the broken remnants of the Mechon. He's joined by the thick-headed but well-meaning Ryan, and Dunban's playful but stern younger sister, Fiora. Much of this introduction is spent soaking in the world, learning the ropes of combat, and getting to know these three and their dynamic. Peace, however, can only last so long. Warning sirens blare out across Colony 9. Far from being exterminated at the Battle of Sword Valley, the Mechon were merely biding their time. Now, their numbers replenished, they descend upon Colony 9, and leading the Horde is something new, a devastatingly powerful Mechon noteworthy for being the first among them to have a discernible face. The group splits up with Dunban joining Shulk and Ryan, but the Monado's toll is too great for him to continue to use it. Shulk knows full well their only chance at success lies with the legendary blade, so he takes a Monado in hand and charges. But something is different. Not only is he able to wield it without consequence, but doing so grants him brief glimpses of the future. Using this ability, he is able to cut a path through the Horde, and the three of them make their way towards Fiora and the phased Mechon in the residential district. The Monado's purpose is to destroy Mechon, to the point that it can't even cut organic matter, yet Shulk is unable to harm the phased Mechon. Helpless, our heroes are forced to watch as Fiora is impaled by the Mekon's claws. Her lifeless body is carted away with so many others, and the Mechon disperse, their goals seemingly accomplished, leaving Shulk, Ryan, Dunban, and the rest of Colony 9 to mourn amidst the wreckage of their homes. It's at this moment that Shulk's purpose is set. He will hunt down the phased Mechon that took Fiora from him and every other Mechon with it. Ryan joins him without a second thought, and the two set out from Colony 9 to take their revenge. Colony 9 is located on the lower half of the Bionis, meaning they must make their way up the Bionis' body, with their first stop being Colony 6 near its leg. On the way, they stumble across a young man named Juju in need of some assistance. After helping him, he repays their kindness by inviting them to stop by the camp he's currently staying at. They accept only to learn that it's a refugee camp. These are the last surviving residents of Colony 6, forced to flee after the Mechon attacked and set up base in the Ether mine beneath the colony. This information is relayed to them by Sharla, Juju's older sister and de facto leader of the refugees. Upon hearing of the attack on Colony 9, Juju infers that the Mechon forces have been split, leaving Colony 6 potentially open to being reclaimed. Sharla is cautious. She's already lost the man she loved and her home to the Mechon and doesn't want to risk losing what little she has left. Frustrated with his sister's hesitation, Juju rushes off on his own, only to be captured by a new-faced Mechon. Seeing no other option, Shulk, Ryan, and Sharla make their way to Colony 6 to rescue him. Delving deep into the ether mines, the trio arrive just in time to save Juju and stamp out what was left of the Mechon forces in Colony 6. But where one falls, another rises to take its place. In this case, it's Metalface, the faced Mechon from the Colony 9 attack, waiting for them at the exit to the ether mine. The Mechon have been busy, and Metalface is joined by a handful of other faces. Dunban arrives just in time to bolster our heroes' numbers, but even his strength can't turn the tide in their favor. It isn't until a beast Metalface calls a Telethia unleashes an attack from the skies that the Mechon are sent reeling, and Shulk finds an opening. He rushes Metalface, and in so doing is met with a vision. A dark tower near the Bionis' head, power coursing through the Monado. Metalface struck, harmed for the first time by the blade. Shulk's vision ends just as Metalface flees, the Telethia attack having spooked him for the time being. Once the dust settles, Shulk relays the contents of his vision to his companions. Dixon, a friend of Dunban's and the man who discovered Shulk 14 years earlier after an incident took the life of his parents, has an idea. He's been up and down the Bionis, and the only place that fits Shulk's description is Prison Island, near the home of the High Entia, who rarely interacts with the other groups on the Bionis. Their next destination set, Shulk, Ryan, Sharla, and the newly added Dunban depart Colony 6. Their footfalls eventually find them in Machna Forest, where they encounter a young woman suffering from ether deficiency. This is Melia, a somewhat stiff and formal High Entia who is tasked by her people to lead a small group in dealing with a rogue Telethia. They failed, leaving her as the only survivor. Charlotte takes the lead and is able to treat Melia, who, in return, offers to show them the way to Aerith Sea on the Bionis' head. To do this, they must travel to Frontier Village, home of the Nopon, a diminutive people, many of whom make a living traveling the Bionis as merchants. Before they continue to the Aerith Sea, Shulk would like to assist Melia once more by taking down the Telethia. The chief of the Nopon overhears this and volunteers the Nopon's finest warrior to accompany them. It's here we're introduced to Ricky, a father of 11 who only took up heroing to pay off the considerable debt feeding such a large family has accrued. Reluctantly, Melia accepts, and our party of 6 manage to dispatch the Telethia, granting some small solace to her fallen comrades. At last, they can make their way to the Aerith Sea, where they find Alchemoth. Upon entering Alchemoth, the group is detained with the exception of Melia, who goes to her father, the Emperor, to inform him of what occurred in Machna Forest, as well as to determine just why your friends are being held. The Emperor recounts a legend of a wielder of the Monado destined to bring about the destruction of their people. As Shulk came bearing a Monado, he saw fit to have his seer, a man named Alvis, who has abilities not unlike Shulk's own, to judge a young man's heart before granting them access to the city. They've also arrived at a pivotal moment in High Entia politics. The Emperor will soon publicly declare Melia his successor, something her stepmother is against. This is because Melia is half Homs. It's been tradition for the Emperor to take 2 partners, one High Entia, one Homs. This has bred animosity amongst some who believe High Entia of mixed heritage to be inferior. Melia's stepmother is one such person and has devised a plan to have Melia assassinated. Shulk has a vision warning him of the impending assassination attempt and convinces Callian, Melia's half-brother, to allow the group to go to her aid. They make it just in time to thwart the assassin and bring her stepmother's betrayal to light. Between rescuing Melia twice over, as well as getting the okay from Alvis, the Emperor sees fit to grant Shulk an audience. It's here we learn that the moment Shulk took up the Monado, the Bionis began to reawaken. Neither it nor the Mechonis truly died during that final battle, but simply fell into a deep slumber. Should the Mechon assault continue, the Bionis will awaken once more, and all on it will perish. Shulk, more certain than ever that the power seen in his vision is their best chance at stopping the Mechon, requests permission to go to Prison Island. But what lies in wait there, even the Emperor does not know. What he does know is that his ancestors locked it away for a reason. Always wanting to put his people above all else, the Emperor is reluctant to grant Shulk's request. His hand is forced, however, when the Mechon attack Alchemoth. The Emperor leaves for Prison Island, seeking to use whatever power is held there to protect his people. Shulk and the others quickly follow after him, and the events hinted at in Shulk's vision begin to unfold. Locked deep within the stone is a giant, the last surviving member of a group thought extinct, going by the name Zanza. Zanza claims to have created the Monado, and offers to unlock the blade's full potential in return for his freedom. Despite some uncertainty amongst his friends, Shulk frees Zanza of his chains, only for the giant to be speared in the gut. This spear was thrown by Metalface, who is joined by a silver-faced Mechon, a new foe who speaks to Zanza as though she knows him. Even with the foresight granted by his vision, Shulk can do nothing to prevent what comes next. The Emperor steps forward to protect the group, only to be struck down by Metalface. It's then when Shulk hears a voice. Zanza tells him that the shackles on the Monado have been released. Shulk can finally fight back. and fight he does, but just as he is about to deal the finishing blow to Metalface, the silver-faced Mechon steps in the way, revealing the Homs beneath the armor. This Homs removes her helmet and they find Fiora staring back at them. The Mechon's goal accomplished, the two faces take this moment of confusion to flee. Even with all that transpired on Prison Island, the group's resolve remains unshaken. While their goal of putting an end to the Mechon is muddied now that they know that within each face sits a Homs, they cannot stand by while the Mechon continue to march on the Bionis. With Callian acting as interim emperor in Melia's place, they leave Alchemoth behind and begin their descent down Valak Mountain. At the base of this peak, they once again encounter the silver-faced Mechon. While she bears none of Fiora's memories, she still means the group no harm, wishing only to speak with them. Before headway can be made, however, Metalface arrives, or rather, Mumkar, the Homs within the Metalface armor. Mumkar was a soldier thought to have perished at the Battle of Sword Valley, and though Dunban called him friend, he secretly loathed Dunban, jealous of his ability to wield the Monado. The two clash, but Mumkar escapes death once more thanks to the timely arrival of a gold-faced Mechon. This is Egil, leader of the Mechon. Before the group can act, he takes Fiora and tells them that should they want her, they'll have to come to Mechonis and get her. And so they do. Winding down the mountain path, they find themselves in Sword Valley as they make for Galahad Fortress, stronghold of the Mechon. Like an irritating gnat they can't shoo away, they find Mumkar waiting for them. This time, however, there is nothing left to stay Dunban's blade. Nothing, that is, save for Shulk. A young man once hellbent on revenge stands conflicted. He thought all Mechon mindless machines, lacking purpose beyond destroying whatever stands in their way. Yet that is not the case, and so he reasons that if thinking living beings are at the heart of the Mechon, then there must be an underlying motivation to their actions, and if those beings can be reasoned with, perhaps they can prevent further bloodshed. Seeing Shulk's resolve in this new course of action stops Dunban, but it's not enough to save Mumkar. A piece of the Mechonis' blade falls, sending their persistent foe to a watery grave. In the depths of Galahad Fortress they find Fiora and Egil, but something is off. Fiora does not speak, instead she lashes out. Egil, tired of her undermining him, found a way to take control, and between their combined might, the group is brought to its knees. And then, whoever is inhabiting Fiora's mind begins to hear a faint voice. The voice of Fiora herself, pleading for whoever this may be to save her friends. This allows Fiora to resist Egil's control, and the wielder of the silver-faced Mechon turns against him once more. This confrontation proves too much for the ancient blade upon which they stand, and the platform beneath their feet crumbles away, sending Shulk, Fiora, and the rest of the group plummeting. They manage to survive, washing up on the island formed from the fallen Mechonis arm. At the moment, there is only Shulk and Fiora, the real Fiora, as whoever else is in her mind has receded for the time being, and thus one part of Shulk's quest comes to an end, as two people who share a love neither can quite put into words, a love that drove one to undertake an insurmountable quest for revenge, and the other to fight to reclaim her body and self, have at last been reunited. They soon track down the rest of their group and discover they're not alone on this island. In a quiet village they find what is left of the original inhabitants of the Mechonis, machine-based lifeforms called Machina. They are led by Egil's father, a Machina named Mikkel, who has a request for them. Travel to the former Mechonis capital of Agniratha and kill his son. As the group considers this request, Dixon arrives in the village. Back on Bionis, Callian has organized the allied forces of the Hyentia, Homs, and Nopon to stand against the Mechon. With this in mind, a plan begins to form. While the armies of the Bionis distract the Mechon, Shulk's group will infiltrate Agniratha and end Egil. In the Mechonis capital, they find a city barren and hollow. The only things left are Mechon and dead Telethia. In a tower at the heart of the city, Fiora interfaces with a machine, granting her a glimpse at the life belonging to the other mind within her body, a woman named Maineth, as the truth of what happened there is revealed. When the Bionis and Mechonis were born, housed within each was a soul. The soul of the Bionis was called Zanza, while that of the Mechonis was called Maineth. Both took host and began to foster life on their respective titans. Life that sought not to wage war, but to share knowledge so that their worlds might grow together. Then, one day, Telethia rained down a torrent of destruction on Agniratha and the Machina living there. Zanza, wielding the Monado, took control of the Bionis and lashed out against the Mechonis. Maineth refused to stand idly by as her people were slaughtered, and so the two fought to a standstill. Weakened, Zanza was imprisoned by the Hyentia, hoping to prevent him from ever using the Bionis again, while Maineth's soul came into possession of Enea, Egil's sister, who would go on to place her in Fiora's body. Though this gave some insight into Egil's motivations, it did not answer the question of why he seeks to eradicate all life from Bionis. Neither the people then nor now had any hand in the tragedy that befell the Machina. The answer to this would come when they at last reach Agniratha's heart and confront Egil himself. What they find is a Machina who is waging a war of attrition. Ether is the foundation of all life in this world, from the plants beneath their feet to the Homs, Nopon, and Hyentia in their homes. Ether, too, is where Zanza and the Bionis draw their power from. With enough ether, the Bionis can reawaken, and the Titan gets its ether from the people living on it. Ego's plan then is to kill every living thing on the Bionis in order to cut off its food source. The group find this information hard to stomach, but regardless of its veracity, they cannot allow Ego to continue killing innocent people. They stand against the leader of the Mechon and fail, only surviving thanks to Meyneth using some of her power to shield them. Victorious, Egil goes to the Mechonis core, forcibly awakening the Titan as he prepares to finally take his revenge on the Bionis. But the group must try again. So using a Machina ship, they follow Egil to the core. Wielding a finer control over the Monado than ever before, Shulk overcomes every attack thrown his way, launching himself at Egil, ready to finish off the Machina who bloodied his hands in his search for justice. But the young man stops short. Zanza's voice whispers at the back of his mind to do it, but Shulk has borne witness to the end result of this cycle of hate and wants no part of it. Instead, he extends a hand in peace. Watching Shulk refuse to succumb to Zanza's will and retain a sense of self gives Egil hope that maybe Shulk is right, maybe they can break the curse of Zanza. And then Shulk is shot by Dixon. This weakens Shulk's grasp on his mind, allowing Zanza to come forth, the god at last given form. This was Dixon's goal all along. Since the day he found Shulk, he raised the boy as a vessel for his lord. Meyneth retakes control of Fiora's body and manifests a Monado of her own. Monados are extensions of a god's will, granting the ability to read the ether around them, to see and alter the course of fate. But it's not enough. Meyneth is unable to stand against Zanza at his full strength, and so on this day a god falls, and Zanza, wielding both his and Meyneth's Monados, returns to Prison Island to remake the world anew. This results in an abundance of ether near Alchemoth, revealing the original form of the Hyentia to be Telethia. The Telethia were created by Zanza to gather ether for the Bionis. The royal tradition of taking a Hom's partner was intended to dilute the Hyentia bloodline and wrest control away from him. However, as this was not a common practice, Melia must watch as Kallian and the majority of her people transform, becoming puppets for Zanza. Shulk awakens back in Colony 6 to the end of the world. Before them lies a god, his disciples Lorithia, Alvis, and Dixon, and an army of Telethia. But even faced with these odds, Shulk knows that he and his friends have to do something, anything. So the group treks through the Bionis' interior and the halls of Prison Island before at last coming to their final destination, Zanza's memory space. Here, in the vast reaches of space, as odd and unfamiliar plans drift by in the distance, they confront Zanza. But the will to create, to shape and change fate is not solely in the realm of gods, as the potential to do so lies within all living creatures. During their fight with Zanza, Shulk taps into this potential and from it springs forth a third Monado. With his friends by his side and the physical manifestation of their determination in his grasp, another god is laid to rest. Alvis then speaks to Shulk, showing him a past from another world. Two scientists argue on a space station orbiting Earth. This station was built with the capabilities to create a new universe, but the technology is untested, the crew uncertain. However, one scientist sees this as his chance to do something no one has ever done before, and so he activates the station. In so doing, he destroys the universe that we know, and in its place, the one Shulk calls home is born. These two scientists, or some remnant of them, carry it over to this new world, becoming Zanza and Meyneth, while the station's onboard AI forms the basis of the being known as Alvis. With the progenitors of this world gone, the power of the Monado of creation itself now lies in Shulk's hands. He is free to shape reality as he sees fit. But Shulk was never one to seek power. He only ever sought to do what was right and empower others to forge their own path. Thus, after a bit of counsel from his friends, his mind is made up. Using the power of the Monado, Shulk creates a world without the need for gods. A world where one may decide their own fate. And so, the Bionis falls, the world made anew. Much has changed, countless homes and loved ones lost, but Colony 9 acts as a gathering place where those displaced can congregate and work together to rebuild. In this new world, our heroes gather on the pier just outside the colony and look out on an ocean of infinite possibilities with the knowledge that whatever may await them, they'll confront it together, the future now theirs to decide. Outside of its unique world setup, Xenoblade Chronicles has a pretty standard first two-thirds. Everything in the lead up to the Fallen Arm is by the numbers RPG plotting, from an attack on the protagonist's hometown turning into a quest for revenge, to the reveal that a fallen friend is both still alive and seemingly working for the enemy. It honestly wouldn't surprise me if some folks put the game down during this stretch. The driving force for much of the early going is Shulk's Prison Island vision, and even after that comes to pass, the narrative's endgame is fuzzy, despite being nearly 50 hours in, so running out of steam would be understandable. I actually found myself in a similar position, but then Egil made his grand entrance, which gave me the boost I needed to press on, and it's a good thing I did because everything after the Fallen Arm is fucking stellar. The events preceding the Fallen Arm are a steady push forward, and it's only at this point that the characters can take a breather and re-examine what their goals are. I would call Xenoblade Chronicles a plot-oriented narrative, reserving the bulk of character development for Shulk, Fiora, and Melia, with optional heart-to-heart events used to flesh out everyone else. That makes this segment stand out all the more, as each member of the cast gets a moment to question their roles and relationships with the rest of the party. Then the Machina are introduced, and we finally learn more about Egil and where his grudge against the Bionis stems from. The plot kicks into gear, answers start rolling in, and the seemingly disparate pieces of the world of Xenoblade Chronicles masterfully come together to form this grand design. Every incidental lore detail is important in its own way to the history of this world and the narrative currently unfolding. It just takes a while for that to come into focus. That said, you can't have a game as long as Xenoblade Chronicles without some dips in quality. A lot of my issues are tied to specific locations, most notably Valak Mountain. The level design here leans on diverging paths and differing elevations. While the densely packed vertical design philosophy could have been a welcome change from the relatively flat, straightforward layouts of the rest of the game, I found it to be more of a chore than anything else. Revisiting Prison Island also stands out. It's not a long segment, but the drab grays, generic castle-like interiors, and lightly demonic reskinned enemies made it feel boring and at odds with the rest of the game. There was clearly a lot of thought put into the environments, their positioning on their respective titans, and the way each biome affects both the aesthetic and traversal. Even areas outside of Bionis and Mechonis like Zanza's memory space hint at the history of the world, but I had no indication as to why Prison Island looks the way it does, or what role it serves outside of being just an endgame dungeon. There are a couple smaller examples. Areas like Satoral Marsh and Mechonis Field are just there to lengthen the time between story beats and add a sense of scale, or removing them might have cleared up some of the pacing issues. I always had a good time vibing, taking in the sights, and doing side quests, so they never really bugged me much. I like to think I've been even-handed thus far, but here's where that gets thrown out the window because I need to talk about the ending. As of writing, it's been several months since I finished Xenoblade Chronicles, and I'm still thinking about it. The fact that the world was created from our own after a scientist with a god complex hit the generate universe button without testing the technology enough, and the way this recontextualizes everything without upending it is just so fucking cool. It is by and large a twist intended for the player. There's no real reason for the cast to care about where their universe came from, but it does still directly affect them as it gives an in-universe justification for why the power to reshape the world exists in the first place. Of course, Monolith Soft, creators of some of the most profound science fiction of the last 30 years, would make the big twist in their fantasy game be that it was secretly science fiction all along. Even without the twist, the character work and the way Xenoblade Chronicles approaches the topic of fate is handled with an earnestness and maturity that more than makes the journey worth it. At the heart of the story is the question, why? Why are the Mechon marching on Bionis? Why must the people of the Mechonis and Bionis fight at all? Why should Zanza get to decide the course of fate? Why should any one person? What starts as a simple revenge tale transitions into a search for understanding, and we watch that understanding shift and grow until our heroes have no choice but to stand against a god, because what they have learned above all else is that Zanza is a self-serving, egotistical prick, and the world has no need for gods like him. And I do think Xenoblade Chronicles benefits from its at times slow pacing in this regard, because it allows players and characters alike enough time to sit on these questions and refine their positions over the course of the game. Shulk going from wanting to destroy the Mechon to extending a hand to the Machina who ordered the attack on Colony 9 is believable because we've seen every moment that informed that decision. On the topic of Shulk, let's discuss the cast. By and large, the game's approach to character writing is subtle and grounded in a way that's somewhat atypical in a genre known for big personalities and easily definable character traits. One exception to this is Ricky, but lacking subtlety is kind of his thing. Even with him in mind, I wouldn't call anyone in the core cast flat, though some do receive more development than others. Our main protagonist is Shulk, the science-minded wielder from Minato. He has a tendency to get stuck in his own head, and a major point of development is his learning to rely on others. I've already covered most of what he's about, so I'll just reiterate here how much I enjoyed seeing his motivation shift over the course of the game. It was heartening to watch as his single-minded quest for revenge gave way under the weight of his kindness and desire to work together to create a better world. Next is Ryan, a bit thick-headed but a stalwart friend who stands by Shulk no matter what comes their way. While he doesn't get much of an arc of his own, he does have a solid moment on the Fallen Arm when he questions if Shulk still needs him around, given how capable he's become as the wielder of the Minato. Admittedly, he gets over his self-doubt almost as quickly as it comes on, but his straightforward nature and dedication to his friends makes him easy to love, plus he gets a cute blossoming romance with Charla. Speaking of, Charla is the group's healer and a survivor of the Mechon attack on Colony 6. Godot, the man she hoped to one day marry, died in the attack, and over the course of the game, she has to manage the pain of his loss as well as her developing feelings for Ryan. That unfortunately sums up the bulk of her arc. There's a subplot involving Godot being turned into a faked Mechon that I think was meant to give her some closure, but she was already moving forward on her own, so it felt unnecessary. She does sometimes take on a big sister role, especially with Melia and Fiora, which I really enjoyed and would have liked to have seen more of. After her is Dunban, war hero and former wielder of the Monado. Being a bit older and world-weary, he almost feels like his development happened before the game even started. Who he is pretty set in stone, so he settles into more of a mentor figure, helping to facilitate others' growth. That's not a bad thing though, as his level head and unwavering determination grounds the cast even when things are at their most dire. Then we meet the noble and sheltered Melia, heir to the Hyentia throne. Her sense of duty makes it difficult for her to rely on others. In this way, she mirrors Shulk, gradually learning to open up and count on her friends. Between his selfless nature and their similarities, it's no wonder she falls for him. I was rooting so hard for Melia, but loved the way her feelings for Shulk were handled. After Fiora regains her memories and it becomes clear that Melia's feelings won't be reciprocated, she accepts it, finding value in their friendship rather than yearning for something different. It's this maturity and her ability to watch as everything she knew crumbles before her and yet still push on that easily made Melia my favorite member of the cast. And then there's Ricky, the perpetually hungry Nopon family man drowning in debt. He is wonderfully ridiculous, constantly calling the rest of the party his sidekicks while also taking credit for their accomplishments. That may sound annoying, but I assure you Ricky's childlike innocence and absurdity colors his antics in an amusing light. And while his large family and lack of money are used mostly for comedic effect, they also provide insight into who he is. Deep down, Ricky just wants to do everything he can to take care of those around him, even if it means going into debt. Last we have Fiora. Even with everything she goes through, she manages to have this boundless energy, always ready to speak her mind and jumping into the fray at the first sign of trouble. She's the brash and impulsive to Shulk's thoughtful and pensive, giving them the effortless chemistry needed to make scenes like the reunion on the Fallen Arm work as well as they do. Beneath her more brazen exterior lies someone who secretly carries a good deal of self-doubt, too. It's little insecurities that lend Fiora as well as the cast as a whole a greater sense of depth. My only complaint with regard to the main cast is that so much of their characterization is locked behind optional heart-to-heart conversations. Xenoblade Chronicles has an affinity system. By raising the affinity between two characters, you'll unlock short heart-to-heart scenes littered around the map. Thing is, it can be a pain to raise affinity. There are two ways to do so. The first involves having both characters participate in combat together, but this can be slow, especially if you're switching up your team a lot. The second requires giving each other gifts. While this way is faster, the gifts used pull from your collectibles, and not every character likes every gift, and I ended up being reluctant to burn through too many on the off chance I might need one for a side quest later on. Besides our heroes, I want to touch on two more characters, specifically Alvis and Zanza. Alvis might be one of the most fascinating characters in the cast. Despite being one of Zanza's disciples, he's more of a neutral force or observer. He has no real allegiances, being more of a guide for whoever has the power over creation. That's why, after Zanza's defeated, he helps walk Shulk through the process of using his power. Also, I love how well his origin as the onboard AI on the station that generates Shulk's universe fits his character. As an AI, he was there to assist and inform, not make decisions, and we see how that was carried over when he was reborn as Alvis. As for Zanza, what makes him so compelling is how he's a near-perfect inversion of Shulk. Shulk is defined by his compassion. He sees value in all living things, even his enemies. He's also distinctly lacking in ego. He's never sought power or recognition, he just wants to help people because it's the right thing to do. Zanza, meanwhile, only sees value in how others can serve him, and if they don't serve him, they shouldn't exist. He also has an ego the size of the sun. Everything he's done has been to gain and maintain power because in his eyes the world has failed and he's the only one who can make it right. Despite not having as much screen time as Egil, he stole the show from me the moment he arrived on scene, easily earning a spot as the true antagonist.